The night was quiet, and the vast communication station floated above Earth like a shining dot among the stars. Inside, only a few people worked during this late hour. Most of the control rooms were dark except one small section, where a young systems engineer named Mara Lewis sat alone. Her job was not dangerous, but it required focus. She worked for the Deep Space Monitoring Division, a part of the global defense network that listened for signals, especially distress calls, from colonies far across the solar system. That night, Mara was tired but determined to finish her shift. She had been checking the signal calibration system, which had been unstable for weeks. The screens in front of her showed streams of numbers, wave patterns, and blinking lights. It was the same routine she had done hundreds of times before. She took a sip of her cold coffee, rubbed her eyes and muttered, "Just one last check. Then I'm done." Her fingers moved quickly over the keyboard as she opened a test protocol that had not been used for decades. It was an old SOS signal generator, something created during the time of Earth's first interplanetary wars. Back then, it was meant to call for help in case a colony was under attack or facing destruction. After those wars ended, the system was never removed but buried deep in the network's database. Mara only opened it because it was linked to one of the broken circuits she was trying to repair. As she typed a few commands, the room filled with a low hum. The signal test began. A red icon appeared on her main screen. Emergency beacon, simulation mode. She sighed in relief, thinking it was only a safe test mode. But the truth was that the system's old code did not understand the word simulation. It recognized only one thing: activation. The computer asked for confirmation. Send SOS beacon? Without thinking much, Mara pressed enter. She didn't realize that the old emergency network was still connected to the new interstellar communication grid. The command went live instantly, flashing across multiple satellites and deep space transmitters. Within seconds, the signal was broadcast far beyond the solar system. A powerful distress call from Earth. Mara stared at the screen, confused. The icon had changed from red to white, showing transmission sent. Her heart stopped for a moment. She leaned closer, reading the message log. It wasn't supposed to say that. No, that can't be right, she whispered. Her hands shook as she opened the control window again. It showed confirmation stamps from several satellites. The SOS beacon had gone through. It was already echoing across the galaxy. She tried to stop it. Her fingers raced over the keyboard, searching for a cancel option. But every command came back with the same error. Access denied. Encryption locked. The system was under an old war protocol that required high-level military clearance. No engineer, not even a senior one, could cancel it once it was active. Panic spread through her chest like fire. She opened the internal communication line to her supervisor but froze. What could she say? That she had accidentally triggered a world-level emergency signal? It sounded impossible. She imagined the reaction, the shouting, the investigation, the end of her career. So she did nothing. She just sat there staring at the glowing screen. Minutes passed. She hoped maybe it was just a minor glitch. Maybe no one would pick up the signal. After all, space was huge and mostly empty. But her hope began to die when the station's automatic alert started flashing. A loud beep echoed in the control room. The system had received a confirmation from Deep Space Command. SOS signal detected. Response initiated. Mara's hands went cold. It meant the signal was already being processed by the defense network. Somewhere out there, people were reacting. Ships were preparing, alarms were ringing, and powerful computers were planning a large-scale response. All because of her. She stood up and paced around the room, her heart pounding so fast that it hurt. "Think, Mara, think," she told herself. But no solution came. She considered pulling the main power plug, but it was too late. The transmission had already left the station. She sat back down and watched as the tracking screen lit up with new signals. Satellites redirecting power, data centers forwarding messages, and long-range fleets acknowledging the alert. For the first time, she realized how powerful a single message could be. The old SOS wasn't just a call for help. It was a military emergency code, meaning Earth is in danger. It was designed to unite all human colonies instantly in defense of their home planet. And now, every one of them would believe Earth was under attack. She looked out the window at the blue planet spinning below, peaceful and unaware. A lump formed in her throat. Down there, people were sleeping, laughing, living their normal lives. No one knew that above them, one mistake had started a chain reaction that could lead to chaos. Her computer pinged again. A message from the Lunar Command Center appeared. Confirm status of beacon transmission. Her mouth went dry. Should she admit it was an accident? Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then fear took control. She typed quickly. Beacon confirmed active. Awaiting further instruction. She lied. The moment she pressed send, she hated herself for it. But she couldn't face the truth, not yet. Maybe she could find a way to fix it before anyone realized. She began scanning the backup system, searching for any way to recall the signal. Every attempt failed. The system's firewall blocked her at every step. She even tried to manually corrupt the transmission ID, but the software's security was too strong. An hour passed. The message had already traveled far beyond the moon's orbit, bouncing between relay stations toward Mars, Titan, and even the outer colonies. In those distant places, emergency sirens were already howling. Humanity's greatest fleets were waking from their long sleep. Mara sat frozen. Her mind replayed that single moment and her finger pressing enter. It had felt so small, so ordinary. Now it felt like the most terrible decision of her life. She thought of her father, who used to tell her stories about the early space wars. Never play with war systems, he once said. They don't forgive mistakes. She finally understood what he meant. Her console's main screen showed hundreds of data lines moving like a heartbeat. The signal was alive, unstoppable. She whispered to herself, "It's just a mistake. It's just a mistake." But the universe doesn't care about mistakes. It only reacts. The silence of the room grew heavy. The stars outside looked distant and cold. Mara felt like they were watching her, waiting to see what she would do next. But she couldn't move. Fear had locked her body. After a while, she turned off the sound alerts, unable to bear the beeping anymore. She sat in darkness, the only light coming from the flashing red indicators on her monitor. Her reflection on the screen looked pale and ghostly. She imagined what might happen next. The Defense Council would call for emergency meetings. Warships would prepare for battle. Civilians would panic. Billions of lives could be affected, all because of one wrong key press. She wondered if she should confess right away. But then, what if they didn't believe her? What if they thought she was a traitor trying to cause chaos? The thought made her sick. Hours later, her shift ended, but she didn't leave. She couldn't. The next shift officer arrived, yawning, unaware of what had happened. Mara smiled weakly, pretending everything was fine, and said she would stay to finish a system check. The officer didn't question it and left her alone again. Now the signal was completely out of reach. The entire communication web was lighting up. Somewhere in deep space, humans who had never even seen Earth were turning their ships toward home, ready for war. Mara covered her face with her hands. A single tear rolled down her cheek. She knew that by morning the world would change, and no one would know why, no one except her. Outside the window, Earth glowed softly in the distance. It looked calm, peaceful, innocent, the way a planet should be. But above it, in the silent darkness, a storm had already begun. Mara whispered one last sentence into the empty room. "Please let it be nothing." But she knew deep down it was already something far too big to stop. When the first response to the SOS signal reached Earth's defense network, the atmosphere in every control room changed. It was the middle of the night, but suddenly every major command center lit up with flashing red alerts. The computers showed one clear message. Earth distress signal detected. Operation Haven activated. Across the globe, commanders and officers rushed out of their quarters. In underground bunkers, in orbiting stations, and on distant colonies, people woke up to sirens that hadn't been heard for almost a century. The old emergency system, thought to be retired, was alive again, and no one questioned it. The code was too specific, too sacred. When Earth sent an SOS, it meant only one thing. The home planet was under attack. Within an hour, communication satellites switched from civilian to military channels. Thousands of encrypted messages spread through the network, summoning fleets and recalling troops. The world's leaders were pulled out of sleep, their faces pale under the light of holographic screens. Presidents, generals, and ministers demanded answers. Who was attacking Earth? Where was the enemy? But no one had clear data. All they had was the signal. In the great orbiting command hub above the Pacific, Admiral Jonas Hale stood in front of a massive display showing the movement of ships. "Activate the fleet," he ordered calmly. "If Earth is calling for help, we answer." It was a statement that echoed through the military hierarchy, repeated in hundreds of languages on dozens of worlds. Humanity had not seen war for nearly 50 years, but the fear of it never completely disappeared. Every colony, every base still had a defense plan ready, just in case. Now those old plans were coming alive. On Mars, red dust storms mixed with the bright flames of ship engines as the planetary fleet took off. On Titan, sleeping soldiers were pulled from cryopods and given weapons. On the Moon, long-range missiles were armed and aimed toward space. Humanity's most powerful fleets, scattered across light years, began to move in perfect coordination toward one single point: Earth. Inside her small communication station, Mara watched the newsfeed and felt her stomach twist. It was happening faster than she imagined. She saw footage of massive warships launching in synchronized rows, their engines lighting up the darkness like rising suns. The headlines read, "Earth under threat. The fleet mobilizes." People were cheering, posting patriotic messages, waving flags. No one knew that it was all a mistake. Mara sat silently, her heart beating so loud it drowned out the hum of machines. Every ship she saw felt like a knife pressing into her chest. She wanted to scream the truth, to tell someone to stop them, but fear chained her voice. If she confessed now, she would be blamed for the chaos, maybe even arrested for treason. So she said nothing. Meanwhile, in the main defense headquarters, confusion spread. Radar systems showed no incoming threat. The sky above Earth was clear. There were no signs of enemy ships or asteroid strikes. Still, the SOS code could not be ignored. It had been created during the old wars specifically to prevent hesitation. If the home planet ever called for help, all human colonies were to respond instantly without question. General Aruna Patel, a sharp-minded strategist from the Asian Alliance, frowned at her console. "Something isn't right," she said. "There's no enemy data. Why would Earth send a code like that without confirming visuals?" But her concerns were quickly silenced by others. "We can't take the risk," said Admiral Hale. "We move first, verify later." And just like that, the decision was made. Humanity's largest war fleet continued its march home. Everywhere, panic began to grow. On Earth, civilians flooded to safety shelters, unsure what kind of attack was coming. News anchors tried to calm the public but failed as rumors spread faster than truth. Some said an alien invasion had begun. Others claimed a rebel faction had launched secret weapons. Cities prepared for blackout drills. Children clung to their parents as sirens wailed through the night. Mara walked outside her station for the first time in hours. From the observation deck, she could see the sky filled with moving lights. Fleets forming formation lines, satellites shifting orbits, defense drones rising in waves. It was both beautiful and terrifying. She realized that she had awakened a sleeping giant. Humanity's war machine, quiet for decades, was alive again. In deep space far beyond Pluto, commanders received the emergency broadcast. Some of them had never seen Earth, but the signal's message was clear. Defend the origin world at all costs. Their ships turned around, engines roaring with energy. One captain, a young woman named Lyra Vance, stood at her bridge window whispering, "Hold on. Earth, we're coming." None of them knew there was nothing to save. Inside government buildings, chaos reigned. Political leaders shouted over each other in holographic conferences. "Where is the enemy? Who confirmed the threat? Why haven't we detected anything yet?" Answers were few. The defense AI simply repeated, "SOS signal verified. Threat probability 99%. The machine had no emotion, no doubt. It followed the code blindly, just as it was designed to do. By the second day, more than 1 million troops were on standby. Thousands of ships formed an enormous defensive barrier around Earth. It was the most powerful armada ever assembled, and it all existed because of a mistake made by one person sitting alone in a quiet station. Mara barely slept. Her eyes burned from staring at the screens, watching the situation spiral further out of control. She tried to think of a way to stop it. Maybe she could send another signal, one that canceled the SOS. But the old protocol didn't allow for that. It required confirmation from 3 of Earth's highest-ranking generals, none of whom even knew about her existence. She thought about writing an anonymous message to the control network, explaining that the signal was an error. But she hesitated. If they traced it back to her system ID, she would be exposed. Her fear was growing heavier than her guilt. Still, every hour that passed made her silence harder to bear. Outside the station, the sound of ship engines echoed through the atmosphere. The sky was never dark anymore. The horizon glowed with the reflection of thousands of engines burning in orbit. People looked up and felt proud, believing their soldiers were ready to protect them. But Mara looked up and saw a nightmare unfolding. The military continued to prepare for battle, running endless drills and weapon tests. War factories that had been silent for years began producing ammunition again. The economy shifted overnight. Every resource, every worker, every ship, everything was focused on defense. Humanity was turning into a war state because of one wrong signal. Somewhere in the Lunar Control Division, a few scientists began to notice strange details in the data. The signal's frequency seemed outdated, almost ancient. It used an encryption method that hadn't been in use for 50 years. "That's odd," one of them said. "Why would Earth use a code that old?" They sent reports up the chain, but no one paid attention. The generals were too busy preparing for the war they believed was coming. Mara's fear reached its peak when she saw a headline that made her blood freeze. "Fleet orders authorized. Offensive strike readiness confirmed." That meant the fleet wasn't just preparing to defend. They were preparing to attack if they detected any threat. One wrong radar reading, one misinterpreted signal, and humanity could start a war against nothing. She couldn't take it anymore. She locked herself in her office, pacing like a trapped animal. Her mind screamed at her to confess, to tell the truth before it was too late. But her heart whispered in fear, "They'll destroy you." The clock ticked slowly toward dawn. Outside her window, the sun rose over Earth, golden and calm. It looked like peace itself. But above it, in the cold emptiness of space, thousands of ships were ready to fire at the slightest provocation. Humanity's entire strength was now a loaded weapon with no target. Down in the cities, ordinary people tried to live their lives, pretending everything was normal. But the tension in the air was real. Soldiers hugged their families before heading to stations. Mothers whispered prayers. News reporters spoke with shaking voices. Everyone waited for an enemy that didn't exist, and still, Mara said nothing. She watched helplessly as the military sent its final confirmation to all fleet divisions. Earth distress confirmed. Engage Operation Haven. Prepare for total mobilization. In that moment, the fate of humanity was sealed by silence. The war fleet moved in perfect order, its engines thundering across the stars. Billions of tons of metal and fire pointed toward Earth's defense perimeter. It was a magnificent sight, beautiful, powerful, and tragic. Inside her small room, Mara closed her eyes and whispered, "Please, someone see the mistake, please." But no one did. The war fleet was in motion now, unstoppable and massive, driven by duty and fear. And all it took to wake this sleeping giant was one human error, one accidental SOS that turned peace into panic. 3 days had passed since the SOS signal was sent, and the world had completely changed. What began as one accidental click had now become the largest military movement in human history. The skies above Earth were filled with the glowing trails of ships preparing for battle. People everywhere lived in fear, waiting for the unknown enemy to strike. But no one had seen the enemy yet because there was none. Inside the control centers, confusion started to spread. The military fleets had reached full readiness, but their radars showed nothing unusual. No foreign ships, no energy readings, no signs of an attack. The silence of space felt louder than ever. Some officers began to whisper to each other, questioning the situation. But fear and pride kept everyone quiet. No one wanted to be the first to doubt the sacred SOS signal from Earth. In the Lunar Control Division, a team of scientists was studying the data again and again. Among them was Dr. Kamal Rahim, a calm and intelligent man in his 40s who had spent his life analyzing communication patterns. When he saw the code of the SOS signal, something bothered him deeply. The encryption format was ancient, one that hadn't been used since the early space wars. He leaned closer to his monitor, running more scans. "This can't be right," he muttered. The signal structure was too old, too simple. It looked like something from the archives, not a modern transmission. He immediately sent a message to the Earth Defense Command, requesting verification of SOS source. Signal format outdated. Possible system error. But hours passed and no one responded. When the reply finally came, it was short and dismissive. Confirmed. Proceed with Operation Haven. Dr. Kamal frowned. Something was very wrong. He knew that if this was an actual emergency, there should be multiple confirmations from different stations, but there was only one, a single transmission from one communication post. It was strange, suspicious even. He decided to dig deeper. While Kamal worked in secret, Mara Lewis was still trapped in her nightmare. She hadn't slept properly in days. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw images of warships, explosions, and burning cities. She couldn't forgive herself for what she had done. The guilt was eating her alive. She watched the news all day, hoping that someone, somewhere, would realize the truth before it was too late. But all she saw were headlines of preparation. Humanity unites in defense of Earth. The largest fleet in history prepares for battle. War readiness level, maximum. No one even questioned if the SOS could have been a mistake. Everyone believed it. The signal had come from Earth itself. That was enough to convince the world. In the streets, people prayed. Soldiers marched through cities, cheered by crowds waving flags. Politicians gave speeches about bravery, sacrifice, and unity. Yet beneath the surface, fear controlled every heart. Some people stocked food, others built shelters, and some left their homes to move closer to military zones, believing they'd be safer there. The world was running on panic and patriotism. At night, Mara sat by the observation window of her station, staring at the stars. She thought about how small her mistake seemed compared to its result. One key, she whispered to herself. Just one key. She wanted to confess so badly, but fear stopped her again. What if they didn't believe her? What if they thought she was an enemy spy trying to disrupt defense operations? The punishment would be death or worse. On the fourth day, Dr. Kamal's investigation reached a shocking discovery. He managed to trace the original signal's path. It led directly to one small communication station, Mara's station. The system log showed the exact time the SOS was activated and the ID of the operator who had sent it. Kamal's heart raced as he saw the name, Mara Lewis. He didn't know her personally, but he recognized the location. That station was meant for maintenance and monitoring only, not for transmitting galaxy-wide distress calls. This confirmed his suspicion. The SOS wasn't a real emergency. It was a mistake, maybe even an accidental trigger. He immediately contacted the main defense command again. This is Dr. Kamal Rahim. I found evidence that the SOS signal originated from a maintenance station. It's not a verified distress beacon. Repeat, it may be a false alert, but again the reply came cold. Report noted. Priority remains with Operation Haven. Kamal couldn't believe it. They were ignoring him. The military machine had already gathered too much momentum. Billions of credits were being spent every hour. Thousands of ships were already in orbit. And leaders didn't want to admit they might have acted on a mistake. To stop now would be to show weakness, something they couldn't risk in front of billions of frightened citizens. Meanwhile, the fleet continued its preparations. Pilots trained nonstop, soldiers loaded weapons, and engineers checked the engines. Every broadcast repeated the same message. For Earth, for humanity. But not everyone felt proud. In the deep corners of the network, technicians whispered that something felt off. They noticed that no enemy communications had been detected. No sign of invasion, just silence. Still, none of them dared to question orders openly. The fear of being labeled a coward was stronger than their doubt. Back in her control room, Mara was losing control of her emotions. Her hands trembled whenever she touched the keyboard. She could hardly eat. The guilt was suffocating her. She replayed the moment of her mistake again and again. The sound of the button click, the red light flashing, her heartbeat pounding. Every second of it was carved into her memory. Then, while scrolling through the system logs one night, she saw something that froze her blood. A message had been sent from the Lunar Division to her command supervisor. It contained her name. Dr. Kamal's investigation had reached her. She stared at the line of text for several minutes, unable to breathe. They knew. Someone had found out. Her first thought was to run. But where could she go? She was in a space station orbiting Earth, surrounded by military personnel. Escape was impossible. Her second thought was to lie, to erase the logs, delete her ID from the system. But that would make things worse. She sat there staring at the empty screen, realizing that the only option left was the truth. Down on Earth, Dr. Kamal was growing more frustrated by the hour. He contacted several scientists and low-level officers, trying to convince them to review his findings. "You have to see this," he insisted. "The signal is fake. It was never meant to be sent." Some believed him, but most were too afraid to speak up. The military hierarchy was too rigid. Only a direct order from the top could stop the fleet now. The situation became even more dangerous when the fleet's automatic defense systems detected unknown energy bursts from space. They weren't real threats and just natural cosmic radiation, but the system's old programming labeled them as possible enemy movement. The fleet began to prepare for engagement. Mara saw the report and felt her heart drop. If they opened fire, even by mistake, the results would be catastrophic. She couldn't let that happen. Not again. Not because of her. That night she sat in silence, tears streaming down her face. Her mind was filled with chaos, guilt, fear, shame, and regret. She remembered her training days when her instructor said, "Our job is to listen to the stars, not start wars." She had broken that promise. She looked at her reflection in the dark glass of the control room. "You have to tell them," she whispered. "You have to stop this." But still she hesitated. She thought about her family, her job, her future. Everything she would lose if she confessed. Far away, Dr. Kamal made one last, desperate attempt. He sent a direct transmission to the Supreme Command, attaching all his evidence. Signal logs, code breakdowns, and timestamps. He wrote in bold letters, "This is not a real SOS. Immediate verification required before further fleet deployment." He didn't know if anyone would read it in time. As the hours passed, the tension in space grew thicker. Warships moved closer to Earth's orbit, waiting for the final order to engage. Mara could feel the weight of her secret pressing on her chest like a stone. If she stayed silent any longer, millions could die. For the first time since the accident, she stood up with determination. Her fear was still there, but beneath it, a small spark of courage began to grow. She decided that no matter what happened to her, she would not let humanity destroy itself over her mistake. The truth had to come out, even if it cost her everything. Outside her window, the stars shone cold and distant, unaware of the chaos unfolding below. The fleets hovered silently, their engines glowing like angry eyes. The world was seconds away from disaster, all because of one signal, one lie, and one woman's silence. And now, the same woman was preparing to speak the truth before the universe heard humanity's guns roar against itself. The universe was now watching in silence. The human war fleet, known across galaxies as the Hammer of Earth, was already on its way, cutting through the dark void of space like a storm of steel and fire. What began as an accident, a simple SOS signal sent by mistake, had turned into a wave of chaos that no one could stop. On the other side of the galaxy, the alien race who had sent the SOS were living in terror. They had meant to call for help, but they never expected humans to answer. The message was meant for their allies, but one small technical glitch sent it to Earth instead, to the most feared species in the known universe. Now, as the stars glowed faintly above, their world trembled. Human ships were approaching at light speed. Massive carriers, destroyers, and frigates filled with heavily armed soldiers and machines designed only for war. The soundless black of space was about to be torn apart. The aliens who sent the signal, the Trivians, gathered in their council chamber. The leader, a frail and ancient being named Jiran, was trembling as he looked at the holomap that showed hundreds of human ships heading toward their planet. "We must tell them it was a mistake," he shouted. But it was already too late. Humans did not turn back once their fleet moved. To them, an SOS was sacred. It meant life or death, and whoever sent it was considered under their protection. Earth's military command had interpreted the SOS as a distress signal from a colony under attack. They thought someone was asking for help against an enemy, and humanity had learned long ago that the universe was full of predators, so they acted fast. Within hours, the War Council authorized a full-scale deployment. Every captain was ordered to prepare for battle. They believed they were saving lives. They didn't know that the sender didn't want them to come. On board the command ship Erebus, Admiral Helena Cross stood silently before the large viewport, her eyes fixed on the distant stars. She was a legend, known for leading the victory of Orion, where humanity had destroyed a massive alien armada with unmatched precision. But even she felt something strange about this mission. "Something's not right," she murmured. This signal, it doesn't match any of our allied codes. Her second-in-command, Commander Reese, replied, The SOS came from a region under no known control, but Command says someone needs saving, and that's enough for us. Helena nodded, but deep inside she felt uneasy. As the fleet entered Trivian space, their scanners detected strange readings. There were no signs of battle, no wreckage, no energy trails. Nothing that showed anyone was under attack. The planets below were calm, their cities glowing peacefully. Helena frowned. Why would someone send an SOS from a peaceful world? She whispered. She ordered a message to be sent to the planet, but the Trivians, too terrified to respond, stayed silent. They thought if they didn't answer, maybe the humans would leave, but silence only made it worse. On Earth, silence meant the worst had happened. The human fleet began to arm their weapons, preparing for a possible ambush. To them, this was a rescue mission turning into a trap, and when humans felt threatened, they struck first. Helena gave the command to activate shields and hold position. But suddenly, a small Trivian shuttle launched from the planet and came rushing toward the fleet. The ship was tiny, weak, and clearly not meant for war. Incoming vessel unidentified, said Commander Reese. It's broadcasting on open frequency. A voice filled the command room. It was trembling and full of fear. Humans, please, stop. The signal, it was a mistake. We didn't mean to call you. We only wanted to contact our allies. The bridge went silent. Helena's eyes widened. A mistake? She repeated softly. She turned to Reese. Did they just say mistake? Reese nodded. Admiral, they did. For a moment, no one spoke. The entire fleet had come across half the galaxy, burning millions of tons of fuel, armed to the teeth, ready to fight. And now they were being told it was all for nothing. Helena closed her eyes and exhaled slowly. If this is true, she said, we've just mobilized the most powerful force in the galaxy for no reason. But before they could respond, a warning alarm blared through the ship. Another alien fleet was approaching. The Dravkons, enemies of the Trivians, had detected the human presence and assumed they were allies of the Trivians. The misunderstanding multiplied. The Dravkons launched their ships preparing for battle. Helena's fleet was suddenly caught between two alien powers, both afraid and both ready to fight. This is getting out of control, Reese said. We're not even sure who the enemy is anymore. Helena's voice turned cold. If they open fire, we defend ourselves. And within moments, laser fire streaked through the void. The first Dravkon ship fired, missing its target by inches, but it was enough. The humans retaliated instantly. Explosions lit up space like fireworks. Down on the Trivian planet, the people screamed as the sky turned red. They could see the war above their atmosphere, the light of thousands of weapons burning through the stars. Jaren fell to his knees, realizing that their one mistake had invited destruction beyond imagination. We have doomed ourselves, he whispered. Back in the human fleet, Helena tried to re-establish communication. This is Admiral Cross of the Human Expeditionary Fleet. Cease fire. We are not your enemies. But the chaos was too deep. The Dravkons didn't understand human language, and their systems translated the message as a threat. They kept attacking. The humans responded with brutal force, their railguns and plasma cannons tearing through the Dravkon fleet. Ships exploded one after another. In the middle of it all, Helena finally saw the truth. The SOS signal had started a chain reaction, a single misunderstanding that now risked destroying 3 civilizations. We came to save, she whispered, and now we are the destroyers. The pain in her voice was heavy. She ordered a ceasefire again, but the battle was already too intense. Hundreds of lives were being lost every minute. Finally, Helena made a desperate decision. She sent a special encoded message directly to Earth Command. The SOS was false, she said. We've made a terrible mistake, requesting immediate retreat authorization. But the response came cold and fast. Negative. Continue engagement until full control of the sector is achieved. The War Council didn't want to look weak. They wanted victory, not peace. Helena's heart broke. She knew what that meant. She was being ordered to keep fighting even though she knew it was wrong. She turned off her mic, looking out at the stars again. What have we become? She whispered. Reese stood beside her silently. He didn't know what to say. On the Trivian planet, chaos spread. Whole cities were shaking from the shockwaves of the battle above. The people prayed to their gods, hoping for mercy. Meanwhile, one small Trivian scientist, a young female named Lyra, worked desperately in her lab. She believed she could prove to the humans that the SOS was a system malfunction, a simple error. She began decoding the signal's data, trying to show that it was never meant for Earth. She transmitted her proof to the Erebus, risking her life in the process. When Helena received Lyra's message, her heart filled with both hope and sorrow. "It really was an accident," she whispered. "All this for nothing." She looked at the battlefield around her, the wrecked ships, the floating debris of once living beings. She made a choice that could cost her everything. "Cut transmission with command," she ordered. "We're ending this now." Helena's ship broadcasted a universal peace signal, ordering all human ships to stand down. The Dravkons, confused, hesitated. The silence that followed was deafening. Slowly, the firing stopped. The burning skies began to fade into darkness again. But the damage was done. Thousands were dead. Helena sat down, her eyes empty. "One wrong signal," she said quietly, "and the universe almost burned." And somewhere far away on Earth, the humans who had sent the fleet celebrated their victory, not realizing the truth, that it was not a war of justice, but a war of misunderstanding. The Trivians would never forget this day. Neither would Helena. It was the day when a mistake almost destroyed everything. The day when an SOS meant salvation, but brought apocalypse instead. Silence settled over the galaxy like a heavy shadow. The war that should never have happened had finally stopped, but its echo still moved through space. Wrecked ships floated between the stars, their broken metal shining faintly under distant suns. The SOS that started it all had long stopped transmitting, yet its mistake had already rewritten history. The Trivians, once a peaceful and curious race, were now a wounded civilization. The Dravkons had lost more than half their fleet, and the humans, the strongest species of all, carried a guilt that would never fade. Admiral Helena Cross sat alone in her command chamber aboard the Erebus. The lights were dim, the air heavy with quiet tension. Outside, the crew moved slowly, cleaning the aftermath of the chaos that had just ended. The war room, once full of energy, now felt hollow. She looked out the viewport again, watching the debris fields drift like ghosts. "We came to save," she whispered to herself, "but we brought destruction instead." The words hurt more every time she repeated them. She had disobeyed orders by stopping the attack. Earth Command was furious. To them, she was a traitor, an officer who refused to follow through with her mission. But Helena didn't care anymore. She had seen the truth in Lyra's message. The SOS was never meant for humans. It was a mechanical glitch in an old Trivian satellite, a cry that should have gone unheard. Yet because humans had learned to always respond to distress calls, they turned a simple error into a galaxy-wide tragedy. Helena opened a recording from Lyra that she had saved privately. The Trivian scientist's voice was soft but filled with sadness. "You humans have hearts that rush to help," Lyra said in the message. "But sometimes rushing without understanding can cause more pain than silence." Those words replayed in Helena's mind again and again. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and couldn't face her crew. Every name lost in battle haunted her. On the Trivian planet, Lyra stood among the ruins of her city. The once bright skies were now covered in thick clouds from the smoke of fallen ships. Families searched for missing loved ones. Children cried in fear, and the sound of rebuilding echoed through the air. The Trivians were not angry, they were broken. They knew that the humans didn't mean to destroy them, but forgiveness didn't come easily. Their trust in the universe was shattered. Lyra often looked up at the stars, wondering if peace could ever return. Days turned into weeks. The human fleet stayed near the Trivian system, helping with repairs and offering medical aid. It was Helena's decision. She refused to leave until the damage was partly repaired. Her crew followed her silently, understanding that this was her way of seeking redemption. Commander Reese noticed how Helena had changed, her once sharp eyes now dull, her tone quieter. "You did the right thing, Admiral," he said one evening. "You stopped the war." She looked at him with a tired smile. "No, Reese, I stopped the fighting. The war inside us is still going." Back on Earth, news of the battle spread fast. The media called it the Great Misfire. People were divided. Some saw Helena as a hero who stopped a meaningless war, while others called her a coward for disobeying orders. The politicians pretended to care about peace, but secretly they worried more about their reputation. They wanted to control the story, to make humanity look like saviors again. They said the SOS mission was a successful demonstration of Earth's power. But Helena knew the truth, and so did her crew. When the fleet finally prepared to return home, Helena visited Lyra one last time. The Trivian scientist was repairing communication satellites on the edge of her city. When she saw Helena, she bowed slightly. "You came," she said softly. "I had to," Helena replied. "I couldn't leave without saying sorry." Lyra smiled faintly. "You already did that, Admiral. You helped us rebuild. That's more than words." Helena looked at the horizon where pieces of crashed ships lay like scars on the land. "I wish I could undo it all," she said quietly. Lyra shook her head. "No one can undo what's done, but you can choose what happens next. Maybe one day your people and mine will meet again, not with weapons, but with trust." Those words stayed in Helena's heart. She offered Lyra a small metallic badge, the insignia of her fleet. "Keep this," Helena said. "A reminder that even mistakes can teach us something." Lyra accepted it, holding it close to her chest. "And you, Admiral," she said, "should remember that compassion, even when it causes pain, is still a gift." Helena nodded, unable to speak, when the Erebus left Trivian orbit. The planet looked peaceful again, at least from space, but the silence carried the memory of everything that had happened. The fleet made its slow journey home, passing through cold darkness where the stars felt like watchful eyes. The crew was different now. No one joked, no one celebrated. They worked quietly, each lost in their own thoughts. Humanity had seen its own reflection in the mirror of the universe, and it didn't like what it saw. Months later, Helena was summoned to Earth Command for an official inquiry. The Great Hall of the War Council was filled with officers, politicians, and reporters. The air buzzed with tension. When she entered, the room went silent. The chairman of the council stood and said, "Admiral Helena Cross, you are charged with insubordination and failure to complete mission objectives." She stood tall, her uniform clean, her eyes calm. "I completed my mission," she said clearly. "I saved lives." The room murmured with whispers. The chairman frowned. "At the cost of human authority." Helena took a step forward. "At the cost of our humanity, you mean? If our power makes us blind to truth, then we are no better than the monsters we fear." Her voice echoed through the chamber. For a long moment no one spoke. Even the council seemed unsure how to respond. Later the verdict came. Helena was removed from command. Her military career was over. But as she walked out of the hall, she didn't feel defeated. Outside, people were waiting. Some carried signs that said, "Thank you, Admiral, and peace has a price." They clapped and cheered for her as she stepped into the sunlight. For the first time in a long while, Helena smiled. Meanwhile, far across the stars, Lyra looked up at the night sky. She could still see the faint blue light of Earth among the stars. Her planet was healing slowly. The children were back in schools. The fields were being planted again, and hope was returning. She often told her students the story of the SOS that brought humanity. But she told it differently. It was not a story of war, she would say, but a story of learning. A story where even the strongest realized they could make mistakes and change. Years passed. Helena retired to a small house near the sea on Earth. Every morning she would sit by the shore watching the sunrise. Sometimes she would think about the stars and wonder what Lyra was doing. She had received a few transmissions from her, short, kind messages sharing updates about Trivian life. In one message, Lyra wrote, "We rebuilt our cities with human technology. Your mistake helped us grow faster than ever before. Maybe everything happens for a reason." Helena read that message many times. It gave her peace. She realized that even the worst errors could create unexpected bridges between worlds. The SOS that had once been a symbol of disaster was now part of a shared history. A reminder that connection, no matter how it begins, can change everything. One evening, Helena looked at the sky again. The stars shimmered like tiny hopes scattered in the dark. She whispered, "Maybe one day we'll meet again, Lyra." Then she smiled softly. Far away, on the Trivian planet, Lyra looked at the same stars and whispered the same words. The universe was vast, yet somehow their hearts were connected by a mistake that turned into understanding. And so, the story of the mistaken SOS ended not with destruction, but with a quiet lesson. A lesson that even the strongest armies, the most powerful fleets, and the greatest minds could still learn something new. Sometimes it takes one small accident to remind an entire galaxy that peace is not found in power, but in understanding. The universe moved on, slowly healing. New civilizations rose and new stars were born. But in the archives of both Earth and Trivian history, one story was always remembered. The day an SOS changed everything. The day humanity realized that even in their rush to save, they must first learn to listen.